Esports. Advancements with blockchain technology. Let's analyze the looming overlap between two sectors that have grown in tandem over the past decade. Moderated by Jimmy Nguyen, Bitcoin Association. Stephen Arnold, Fracture Labs. Oron Barber, CoinPoint Group, Inc. Blaine Graboyes, GameCo, LLC. Chris Kissack, SMP Esports.
Woohoo! All right, two more panels and conversations to close out our blockchain afternoon. So now we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the emergence and rise of esports and how it relates to this whole world of blockchain we are interested in about. So why don't I ask each of you to give a quick introduction of yourselves and your company for our audience.
Hi there, I'm Stephen Arnold. I'm the CEO of Fracture Labs, which is a video game company developing a game called Decimated, which allows users to compete with each other to earn cryptocurrency and trade digitally scarce virtual items.
My name is Oron Barber. I'm the founder and CEO of CoinPoint Group. We are focused on marketing and education solutions into the blockchain space for iGaming businesses.
My name is Blaine Graboyes. I'm the co-founder and CEO of GameCo. We launched the category of video game gambling and casinos.
My name is Chris Kissack. I head up SMP Esports, and we provide corporate services to esports organizations and athletes.
Okay, so people talk about use of blockchain technology and cryptocurrency in addition within the world of esports. What are trends you're seeing in terms of use cases that you think are good uses and ones that, are less good or bad?
I think that in terms of good uses are the digital scarcity of virtual items. There's platforms such as OpenSea.io where gamers can trade virtual items with each other. So essentially, games companies could give virtual items to gamers for free because they know that they're going to trade them with each other, and then they can have revenue share agreements written into the smart contracts. So that's definitely one of the benefits, I think, of using blockchain technology for video games and virtual assets. And also, I wanted to talk about the possibilities of staking on the outcomes of video games, such as PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds or Fortnite, for example, where you have scenarios where you have 100 players all competing with each other at the start of the game. You could stake, you've got a 1 in 100 chance of your chosen player winning, and then if that person is eliminated, then you can essentially stake again, and then it's like gambling on the outcome, right? So yeah.
I think basically everything that blockchain can bring to the iGaming world, it makes sense also for esports, of course. Everything that is in terms of transparency and in terms of open sourceness of the traffic that is run on the blockchain. One very exciting thing that we see from our side on the esports platform is the way, like you mentioned, to tokenize basically everything in the esports space, starting with the player to the group, with the assets. In some cases, tokenizing specific spots inside this arena. We mentioned Fortnite. So it brings a lot of added value to the esports, and it brings a lot of opportunities for the players, for the affiliates, for the sponsors, and so on.
Yeah, I would agree. Virtual items, I think, are a great use. Payments, of course, particularly when it comes to sports betting. I also think, because you were touching on, what are some of the trends that aren't necessarily that important, is really thinking about the solution for the problem and making sure that it's actually valid and adding benefit. There's a lot of underlying regulation and licensing that already exists. So we have to make sure that if we're applying these technologies, they actually have a benefit.
I think to me it's smart contracts. So working with esports organizations and players, there's still areas where players aren't getting paid on time and in full. That still happens.
Right.
So if you could utilize sort of blockchain to be able to have that transparency, and you've got a young player that's going from the bedroom and aspirations to get on the big stage, that he knows that he's going to get paid on time and in full. And there's a lot of exciting companies in the blockchain space that are looking to be able to use that technology.
One thing I want to talk about in terms of the negatives is that if players are earning cryptocurrency for staking on the outcome of a game, if that cryptocurrency can be withdrawn in exchange for fiat, then you get yourself into a whole legal situation where I think that it would be much better if people are receiving cryptocurrency for the bets that they've made on the outcome of a video game in exchange for virtual items inside the game that they're actually playing. So it's entirely enclosed inside the ecosystem of the game, rather than it being you're betting to earn cryptocurrency that has real-world value. The moment that it has real-world value is the moment that it becomes more complicated.
Of course, it's more complicated but more valuable. Right? Yeah. Let's focus on payment of players. Right? Will someone give us kind of an overview how players typically get paid today in esports, and then how we think blockchain technology could change that to create more direct relationships, for example, between sponsors of the players and the players?
Sure, it's a huge issue. There's actually a great startup that just launched. I'm not involved, but it's called Prize Payments, and it's meant to solve exactly this problem. I've been in the esports industry about 10 years. I've made many payments to players, both big and small, and it is a huge issue. So typically the way it's handled is you have to do KYC, AML on the player. Many of the teams and leagues, to your point, are dozens or hundreds, or I've even heard of accounts now of being tens of thousands of payments behind. Yeah. I might win a tournament, I might be slow to report my, give in my paperwork. It's very slow and tedious to do KYC, AML. So it is an area where blockchain could be very valuable, where I, as a player, do the work beforehand to be verified, do my KYC, AML, and then have a blockchain transaction to receive my payment. And these sometimes are massive, multi-million-dollar payments.
I mean, I've met players that have been paid in hardware.
In what?
In hardware, in monitors, in rigs. And because you have to remember that a lot of the esports decision makers, they have very little exposure to business. They've come from bedroom, from playing pro, and while they'll be exceptional at understanding the landscape of esports, they won't necessarily understand the importance of managing cash flow, of moving money from one section to another. So if there's the opportunity to educate. I think education is the biggest stumbling block from a blockchain and a cryptocurrency into the esports space. I was at an esports event in London yesterday, and I advised I was coming on to this panel. And as this is being recorded, I can't share every comment that was made by people within the esports space when I mentioned blockchain. But I did meet some guys who were very passionate about gaming and had been working on blockchain pieces. The Edge guys, the Galaxy guys, they're working on blockchain platforms to facilitate the payments. But there is still areas within the esports space that are quite hesitant as soon as you mention the word blockchain, because they have that connotation with cryptocurrency.
Yeah. So, Oron, I was going to ask you, we talked earlier about the micropayments capabilities on BSV opening up new ways to create payment and earning opportunities for online interactions. Do you see how that might be used to pay players for other types of interactions, not just winning a tournament or game,
Definitely.
but paying for something else?
Not many years ago, as a football player, you used to send your video cassettes, or your agent used to send your video cassettes to the sponsor, to some clubs to maybe consider signing you for the club. Now, take it fast forward to today. You have an esport that I really want to be an esports player. Okay, so I train myself and I participate in tournaments. Everything is recorded. So my audience and my believers and my fans, when they see me training with myself at home, basically they can talk and they can incentivize me to train more and to go to this tournament and others. I build my reputation, and everything is trackable and everything is known and everything is public. So these clubs or these sponsors can find me even before I'm becoming a fan. And if you can analyze this data in a way, big data of course, in a way that it's, like you said, 10,000 of transactions, of milli transactions, then you build yourself as an asset, as a player, / as a group, / as a team, and so on.
Yeah, you get paid for other types of interactions as well. Let's talk about developers. How can blockchain systems change the way developers get paid? For example, can they get paid for delivering just enhancements to games or portions of games, such as items, skins, in a way that is more individualized than you can do today?
Yeah, so I think that in that kind of case, at the moment you have a lot of service providers that create assets for game development studios. They usually work on a kind of hourly basis or a weekly kind of salary, for for example. But maybe in the future what's going to happen is they're going to be the content creators and then tokenize them and then allow the game companies to use those assets, and they're always going to get a revenue share of the use.
Coded into the token.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And then if the items are traded with other gamers, then they would have that revenue share kind of written into the smart
I mean,
contract.
the world's biggest esports titles were developed by fans.
Yeah.
If you take a look at CSGO was a mod of Half-Life 2. You take a look at League of Legends and Dota 2 spawned out of a Warcraft 3 mod. So I think being able to incentivize the independent developers in that model, I think is definitely the way to go.
So what we're working on at the moment is the ability for content creators to upload their assets onto our marketplace, and then we allow the community to vote on what they want to see tokenized in our game and essentially other sci-fi games that are similar to our IP. So we're only going to sell virtual items that the users want to buy, and then we assign a certain level of digital scarcity, and we have that revenue share agreement in the platform. And then if they're sold between the users, which is actually a much bigger marketplace than the primary market, there's still that revenue share agreement. So yeah, I mean, allowing the users to create content as long as there's that kind of quality control process, so they're not just uploading anything and memes and other kind of content, but there's a level of QC there. Then I think it's a really, really valuable industry.
Yeah, I would agree. Incentivizing and rewarding community content creators in asset stores, I think, is very valuable. I know, when you think about the Unity and Unreal asset stores, they're huge, centralized, but also what ends up happening is one person might download it and share it with all their friends, and essentially that only became one transaction, and the owners aren't really being compensated. I think on the flip side, though, we have to be really careful about the trend in microtransactions, which ultimately aren't very popular with gamers. The idea that I buy a $60 AAA premium game, and then I'm essentially forced to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to have the true benefits of the game that I have to unlock over time. So
what if you could earn? What if the games allow players to actually earn microtransactions?
Yeah. So if there was a new way to balance that, I think it would be really valuable.
Yeah. Let's talk about publishers, because they have to deal with all the royalty tracking and payments in the game world. And Microsoft, announced, in the last couple of years they were going to try a blockchain method of trying to automate and make more efficient the process of paying royalties to publishers. Do you see that coming to more broadly in esports with blockchain technology?
Yes. Yeah, definitely, because once there is a transaction, there are so many other components that take their share, and it's very common to have it on the blockchain in the iGaming space, and it's expanding, and of course esports is part of it. And once one player make some kind of revenue, the game provider and the developer and the platform and the event manager in some cases, of course, are taking their share. But I think that still we need to remember that there is a gap between decentralized application developers on these platforms that are very blockchain-oriented to the market that we see on the other tent on the other side, that 90% of it don't understand the values. And even if they understand the values, it's hard for them to implement it and to spread it out to the rest of the components. Because if, in the best case, the platform provider and the game provider and the affiliates and the payments, all of them understand blockchain and everything is on the smart contract and talk to each other, it's easy. And if one of them is not, then it's becoming more complicated. And this is the gap maybe that we need to help as educators and early adopters of blockchain technology to the iGaming industry.
Yeah, we work primarily in land-based at GameCo, and we're ultimately a publisher. So we have developers, large and small. We have brand licensees. So Bandai Namco makes games on the platform. We have licenses with, let's say, CBS for Star Trek, and we have to send out quarterly royalty reports to each of them. I was just in that moment thinking about the conversation I would have to have with CBS's finance department that they're now going to get their royalty report via blockchain and Bitcoin SV or some other crypto. That would be a very, very difficult. Most of them, and this points to the disconnect in the culture right now, won't even accept a wire transfer. Right. You have to mail a physical check so that they have their own internal auditing and receivership process.
Which sounds silly, right?
It sounds very silly in today's world, but it's the reality that we're on a precipice, if you will, of change.
Yeah.
You mentioned the regulators in your speech before, and the regulators, yeah, they're avoiding and they're hesitating and they're not sure. But once the regulators, and we have some case studies already here and in Asia as well, once the regulator understand the technology and using blockchain technology to audit, because it makes sense to use this technology to audit the blockchain businesses, then it becomes more transparent, and for them it's a step forward. You need to talk to bankers and people like that. You know, it's a process. It takes time, but eventually, once they understand and are ready to implement, then we're moving forward.
One of, I think, the most fascinating uses for blockchain technology and tokenization in esports is the idea of giving players some ownership or at least rights in things they create in a game, a unique avatar, skins, unique items they might create in a game, especially for successful players, right? So that they can not only monetize them internally with probably a revenue share to the game operator, but port them to other games. Have you seen or heard about any companies trying to implement this? Because I think that's really useful.
The challenge is going to be outside of that publisher. So it's fine if it's kept within Valve, and you can jump. I mean, if I think back the amount of money my eldest has spent on things like Team Fortress 2, which is pretty much a dead game now, and he spent hundreds and hundreds of pounds on that, and he doesn't play it anymore. But if those assets could be moved over into a different title within the Valve ecosystem, that would be great. But I think the challenge is going to be if you've got Activision Blizzard accepting something from Valve and vice versa.
I definitely agree. I think that it's going to be publisher specific because obviously they all have their own game engines.
Yes.
Ubisoft has got Snowdrop, Electronic Arts has got Frostbite, Epic Games have got Unreal Engine, Unity, obviously Unity, right? It's difficult for there to be interoperability between those exchanges, especially because all these game companies have got their own pipelines and naming conventions for how the game actually works behind the scenes. So in the case of like 2D items, which is just like a flat image, you can easily transfer that between any type of game that would accept or have a partnership with other companies, such as with Engine. Engine has the multiverse, which is a lot of indie game developers that get together and create often card collectible games and that kind of thing. It's easy for there to be interoperability between those games, but I agree with you completely because I think that what's going to happen is in the future, each of the giant top 20 publishers are all going to have their own blockchains or partnership with blockchain solutions, and they're going to be able to have tradable assets between their own games and the developers of their games because of those conventions. But like you say, between Activision and Rockstar, Activision and Sony, for example, I'm not sure that's ever going to be the case.
But being able to have ownership of that could be really valuable. If you look at what happened with Blitzchon, so he was a Hearthstone player and he was banned by Blizzard. His winnings were kept back, and then a blockchain-based Hearthstone type game came forward, Gods Unchained, and said, look, come and play on our platform. And I know a lot of people that blitzed their cards in protest and moved over to that platform because of that opportunity where they own those cards. They're unique, they own them. I think there needs to be that killer app. There needs to be a killer app within the blockchain space to drive the casual gamers and the esports gamers to that. I think we've not seen that necessarily yet.
I wanted to just jump in again with regards to, there's a company called Pixel. You know Pixel? They're creating the Sandbox, which is like a voxel-based kind of Minecraft game where the users can create their own vehicles or their own animals and that kind of thing. Now that's obviously quite simple because it's voxel-based, so you can easily transfer those assets between other games that are voxel-based because they're based on that technology. And I think that we're going to see a lot more games that are kind of Minecraft-inspired with those kind of like pixelated graphics, with this kind of tokenized assets, and putting it in the hands of even like young kids that want to create like some kind of giraffe like out of pixels, and then they can play it and share it with their friends.
I think the point of needing a real hit game is the challenge. I've been making video games for 20 years. It's really hard to make a hit video game.
So let's, with our remaining time, let me focus on this last topic. We talked a lot about these other uses of blockchain for payments, for tokens, smart contracts. But what about its usage as a data ledger? We're seeing that more with BSV because of its massive scaling, where a company like the CryptoFights game is using the blockchain to record data about the game, the players, the moves. Is this something that you think should be unlocked more with esports? And what are some examples you can think of where people out there might be thinking, oh, wow, I hadn't thought of that. I could use the blockchain as a data store related to esports in some way. Oron, I know
Yeah,
you think
good
about
question
this.
because I got prepared. So, we're talking about tokenizing of the assets and the players and so on. Imagine that you can tokenize specific spot in specific games. So you have this Fortnite arena, and there is a tree somewhere, and you can actually tokenize this tree, and you can sell sub-tokens of this tree to other users because this tree is very good to climb on and shoot from this tree. And you actually tokenize this tree like an asset of successful activities in this game. So this is another opportunity using this technology to build a new revenue. So you just tokenize assets or spots within the game, and you sub-sell it, and you sub-lease it, and you can take it forward. So if we're talking about micro-penning and mass data that you need to handle and you need to audit for yourself and later for third party, that's definitely a case study or good solution.
A lot of what we've been talking about is really about video games. And just to touch on your question, esports and gambling, because we're here at Sigma, probably the biggest issue in esports gambling is integrity.
Sure.
Making sure that players aren't cheating, there's no match fixing. And it's an excellent potential use case for blockchain, where integrity commissioners, teams, leagues, publishers could all be standardizing on a blockchain solution where a player's winnings are potentially held until bets and outcomes are verified. I think it's an area that would be great to see more innovation, because what it would do is move a lot of the black market underground betting into legal, licensed, regulated betting.
Yeah. Thoughts?
Oh, no, I'm okay with that one.
All right, in our last couple minutes, let me ask each of you to, give your thoughts to our audience about where you think the esports world best is going to intersect with iGaming in terms of betting. What are sort of innovations or trends you hope to see in the future?
I think, as I mentioned at the start, I don't want to give away all my ideas, but I
Just
think
give away one. Just
the one that I said earlier on, which I'd like to iterate on, is the ability for players to be able to spectate on the outcome of a battle royale scenario, where the odds are a lot higher when they're betting at the start. But if they lose, then they can continue, and it's all instantaneous. So they can be, I lost that one, but I'm going to bet again on the outcome of this. I think that this is the most amount of value is the speed of the transactions and the transparency and security. Yeah.
Well, at GameCo, we just launched the first casino esports product. And when I say first, it's actually on the casino floor, working with casino accounting and technology systems. And we could be playing head-to-head or in a tournament at the casino for real money. And we're starting to look at the ability to do that online in the iGaming space, and then combining that also, as you were saying, with esports betting as well, so that we could be competing, people could be betting on it, and you have an entire ecosystem around esports and gambling.
I mean, I agree with these guys. I mean, looking at the trend and sat with esports decision makers over the last 6 months, is looking at how to kind of break down that wall between your Twitch viewers and the actual players, and how to make it more interactive. And that interactivity, there will be individuals that do want to bet at the same time as well. So looking at those battle royale type games, those users are now becoming more influential in what happens in game. So there's a lot of scope for taking some of that interaction, and maybe some of the things that you're working on, taking some of that interaction and being able to spin off side bets off that as well.
Right, Oron, last thought for us. What do you hope to see as an innovation?
I think the esport is a good starting point, because the profile of esport economy is very similar to blockchain, very techy and high-end and so on. And everything that we are implementing or will implement, or you guys are doing in the esport space, will affect the iGaming world. It's much easier to implement blockchain technology into slots and roulette and stuff like that, and maybe more complicated and with more opportunities in esports. Definitely, blockchain is going to take over a massive part of this iGaming world. We see it growing year after year, and it will be here again in 2 years or 3 years times, and it will be a different story.
All right, well, I can't wait to see what unfolds with esports and iGaming. Please give a round of applause to our panel for me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.